I hope you're all doing very well. In a cyber cafe, they were announcing a victory in a League of Legends match, where the protagonist's friend was impressed because he had won again. Although the protagonist found playing alone a bit annoying, his friend congratulated him, saying that former professional players are always that good. In fact, his friend wanted to buy him something to eat afterward, and even offered him something from the store, which our protagonist gladly accepted while his friend stepped out for a bit. For the protagonist, losing wasn't so bad since he was in the silver rank, which is relatively easy. However, it had been a year since he stopped being a professional player. Despite retiring just before debuting, he still wasn't treated like a professional in gaming halls, and that didn't bother him. But upon seeing the news of a player winning a championship and kissing the trophy, he began to wonder if people should live within their means. Here we are introduced to the protagonist, Han-jun, a 21-year-old who considers himself a fugitive. For him, everything was fine as long as he had something to eat and could rein in that small space. Suddenly, he heard a girl complaining, saying that the game was garbage and cursing her team for doing nothing. She compared them to insects for being useless, though her friend tried to calm her down, reminding her she couldn't smoke there. However, the blonde insisted that she wanted to enjoy her break, arguing that she had a social life and it wasn't unusual for someone to smoke. The girl's appearance didn't match their vocabulary, and he also noticed they had a low rank in the game. He mumbled something, saying he didn't understand why they couldn't stay quiet for a bit. The girls heard him and asked what he had said. One of them approached him, demanding he repeat it. Feeling uncomfortable, he tried to dodge the topic, but the blonde, eager to smoke, threatened him and told him to follow her outside. Once outside, she asked if he saw her as a brainless piece of meat. Although he denied it, he had somewhat insinuated it. Annoyed, the blonde grabbed him by the shirt and warned him not to go around speaking recklessly because it would bring him trouble. Han, unsure of what to say, was shoved by the girl. He tried to grab onto something but ended up accidentally grabbing her personality. Her friend told Han not to cross the line, although the blonde noticed it was because of the push. However, she also realized the boy was blushing with embarrassment and thought he found her attractive. Han apologized, saying he hadn't had anything else to hold on to, but the blonde didn't care. She saw him trembling with fear and decided to be merciful, letting him go that day. She just wanted to enjoy her day playing. However, she took some photos of him to remember his expressions and warned him not to stand out too much, or she would post them online, ensuring that after that he wouldn't have a peaceful life. Han was still trembling, and the blonde looked at him like a poor boy. This made him recall his days with the team when they mocked him for wanting to be a professional player. At 20 years old, he was considered a failure, someone without talent who was just pitiful. That memory of being called a poor boy echoed in his head. Back in the present, Han, frustrated, asked the girl to stop. He commented that even though he was in the gold rank and couldn't keep up with the game, he knew they were the ones causing trouble. He demanded an apology, arguing that they had been violent with someone they didn't even know. The blonde, laughing, reminded him that he was the one who had started by insulting them. She couldn't understand how someone could behave like that. For the blonde, it was all meaningless. But since they had reached that point, she asked him what his rank was. When he told her it was higher than theirs, the blonde noticed his screen showed silver. So she proposed a one-on-one match. Or if he was scared, she would suggest the terms. She suggested that if he lost, he would have to pay for a year of free games at the cyber cafe, something her friend tried to dissuade her from betting. The blonde, confident in herself, secretly told her friend that she had actually forgotten her wallet at home, which her friend found a bit sad. The blonde wanted to know if Han accepted the bet, but first he wanted to know what he would win. Left thinking about a good reward, until suddenly, nervously smiled, approached, placed a hand on her shoulder, and whispered in her ear that he had noticed how he avoided eye contact every time she spoke to him. She asked him if he was truly pure of heart, which made him stammer and blush. At that moment, the girl confirmed what she had suspected since the previous incident when she had seen his flushed face. She then proposed that if he won, she would let him repeat what had happened. "What do you think?" she said, adding that she was quite popular and that he would never again have such an opportunity in his life. Despite blushing, he adamantly refused. The girl, visibly frustrated, began yelling at him, calling him strange and asking why he would reject an offer like that. Was he crazy? But he asked her to think rationally. If he won, he wouldn't gain any real benefit. After all, if he lost, he'd have to pay her a year of free gaming, which was a highly disadvantageous bet for him. The blonde thought about it, and although she didn't agree, she couldn't deny he was right. Even so, she insisted that when someone made a bet, they should go all the way and do whatever it took to win, which embarrassed her friend, who couldn't believe what she was hearing. Nonetheless, the blonde decided to make one final offer. She would improve the terms of the bet. She would let him do whatever he wanted with her personality for 15 minutes with no limits. This proposal left him speechless. Although he wasn't sure, the girl took his silence as an agreement, even though he had simply remained quiet due to the situation. The more he thought about it, the more he felt he had no chance of winning. But seeing how things were unfolding, he began to get angry. This was the first time he truly wanted to beat someone. Hours passed, and the word defeat appeared on the blonde's screen. Surprised, he wondered how he had managed to beat her. The girl, for her part, couldn't believe it. She had used her foolproof strategy, but still lost. As she tried to process what had happened, she heard him remind her, in a somewhat chilling voice, of the promise she had made and asked her what she would do now that he had won. The blonde, stammering and clearly embarrassed, tried to brush it off, but he insisted she keep her word. Nervous and flustered, the blonde accused him of cheating, since she didn't understand how she had lost. He, on the other hand, boasted about simply being very good. The girl, still shouting, kept insisting that everything was strange, especially because she felt she had been winning at first. It seemed suspicious to her that starting from the third match, his movements had drastically changed, as if he were dancing around the turret's attacks. She accused him of cheating, claiming that someone in the silver rank couldn't play like that. He laughed, finding her accusations ridiculous, knowing that any professional player could do the same. But then, he quickly fell silent, realizing he had almost revealed his secret. He knew that someone in silver rank shouldn't be able to play the way he did, and decided that in the next match, he would play at a gold rank level. The blonde, still frustrated, demanded another match, once again accusing him of cheating. He assured her he wasn't using any hacks, especially in a cyber cafe. But the girl, throwing a tantrum, dropped to the floor, saying that if they didn't play again, she would leave. Finally, the blonde accepted her defeat, but proposed one last match, adding a new condition. She asked what would happen if she won, and before he could respond, she insinuated that she would take away his purity of heart. These words left him not fully understanding what she meant. The blonde's friend, alarmed, asked her if she was crazy for making such a proposal, but the blonde, determined, couldn't accept losing to someone in silver rank. Sun Yeonji, her friend, once again tried to stop her, reminding her how absurd the situation was. However, the blonde reassured her, convinced she wouldn't lose again. She knew that in a one-on-one match, everything could change in an instant. Although she had been in control before, she lost it. So she asked Lee if he accepted the challenge. Lee, although nervous, wanted to ensure the girl would truly keep her word without complaints. The blonde, with a defiant air, warned him not to be deceived by luck, because she would now play seriously and make him cry. However, the result was a crushing victory for Lee, leaving the blonde devastated. To her, it was all ridiculous. Lee, for his part, reminded her they had switched computers to prevent cheating, so there was no excuse. Although the blonde asked Yeonji for help, she didn't know how to intervene. Meanwhile, Lee hurried her to fulfill her part of the deal. Yeonji, observing Lee's cold gaze, approached him to try to calm the situation, apologizing for her friend's harsh words. Just as she was about to discuss the terms of the bet, her phone rang. It was her mother calling. Yeonji's expression completely changed. Answering the call, she explained to her mother that she had gone out for a bit but would head home right away. She seemed disheartened, apologized to the two, and explained that she had to leave immediately as she was needed at home. Before leaving, she wished her friend luck, suggesting she reconsider and find her common sense. Left alone, the girl tried to downplay the tension. She stood up and apologized for the inconvenience, mentioning she had to leave. However, the boy stopped her, visibly irritated. At that moment, she wanted to know what she had done wrong, and it all seemed ridiculous to her. He reminded her of all the provocations she had made during the game, finding it absurd that she was now trying to flee. The blonde, uncomfortable, tried to justify herself by saying it had all been part of the excitement of the game and suggested changing the terms of her promise. But Lee, relentless, reminded her of what she had promised in case of losing, accusing her of being a natural liar, something he had already anticipated. He considered letting the matter go with something simple like a meal, but he also thought about savoring his victory a bit more. Then, she took the initiative and suggested something unexpected. She proposed going together to a magical town, saying they couldn't stay there and confessing she had no money, asking Lee to pay for the place. Lee, puzzled by her words, fell silent in thought. When they arrived at the place, the boy was noticeably blushing, while she smiled, confident that someone like him couldn't distinguish between a magical town and a hotel. Lee attempted to suggest changing the terms, but the girl noticed he liked beating around the bush and continued with her plan. When Lee asked why she insisted so much, She replied that if they wanted to fulfill the promise, they had to do it that way. Lee, still confused, saw her determination as she assured him she was ready to keep her part of the deal and asked him not to be so obvious about his inexperience. Lee, nervous, realized she was serious and began to think she really had a great personality. He wondered if all of this was real and whether they were somehow talking about a mass or some other ritual. Despite the surreal nature of the situation, Lee couldn't fully believe what was happening. On the other hand, Hyun-ah, somewhat disappointed, realized that some guys could be incredibly clueless, even with the opportunity served on a silver platter. She tried to leave, but Lee, in his mind, tried to calm down. He knew she was right. At 21, it was possible he'd never have another chance like this, which made him reflect. When Lee approached to take one of the buns Hyun-ah had offered earlier, he stopped and, in an unexpected gesture, formally introduced himself as Do-hyun, a second-year university student, mentioning he hadn't introduced himself properly before. This act left the blonde speechless, but she quickly started laughing, finding the boy's polite and kind demeanor amusing. She saw a tender side to him, which she liked. Then Hyun-ah introduced herself, revealing she was already a university graduate and that it was a pleasure to meet him. Although Do-hyun responded that he hoped to get along well with her, he couldn't stop thinking about the fact that he was speaking to a graduate. Meanwhile, he began stroking a nearby pillow, fascinated by the softness of the material. Hyun-ah, seeing Jun's reaction, suggested he be more careful with his things, but he, completely absorbed in the pillow's texture, excitedly commented that it was the first time he had touched one of such high quality. He was so moved that he shed a few tears, grateful to be alive to experience such a moment. Hyun-ah, puzzled yet slightly amused, watched him with curiosity. At that moment, Hyun-ah made a small noise, something she immediately tried to deny, but Do-hyun, already immersed in the strange situation, probably understood what it was about. However, he decided not to mention it and instead asked Hyun-ah if they could try something different. After a moment, the boy was already hugging Hyun-ah from behind. Although you already know what was happening, Hyun-ah reminded him he only had 15 minutes. Of course, he was more focused on listening to her breathing and smelling her shampoo, as well as finding, let's say, great relief in the massage she was giving him. However, she reminded him again that he only had 5 minutes left, which surprised him since he didn't think time had passed so quickly. Jun tried to say something, but the words wouldn't come out. He swallowed hard and begged Junah to let him try a bit of the bread. Although she was somewhat embarrassed and a little puzzled, Junah tried to explain that they had bet on this within his 15 minutes, and it seemed fair to do so. Junah thought he was crazy since it all seemed too absurd to her. However, Hun knelt down, pleading with her to let him do it, as it might be his only chance to try bread of such high quality. To her it was ridiculous, but she couldn't refuse, as those were the conditions they had agreed upon. So she reset the timer and let him enjoy the bread. The boy, though nervous, accepted and started eating. It surprised Junah so much that June couldn't help but ask her if something was wrong. For her, the curious part was that it had been a long time since she'd offered bread from her bakery. That embarrassed the boy, but Junah hurried him, saying his time was running out and he needed to speed up. She leaned closer, coquettishly reminding him he only had 2 minutes left and shouldn't waste time blushing. Laughing, she commented that he was pure-hearted and a little crazy, which made Jun wonder if she was the same delinquent he met in the game room. Jun continued enjoying the bread while his mind wandered, almost as if he wanted to cross the gates of heaven. But Junah stopped him, wanting to know what he was doing. Nervously, Jun realized he'd gotten carried away by the situation and mentally scolded himself for going beyond what was planned. Still, Junah told him he could do whatever he wanted, saying this wasn't her first time at a mass and that if he had no obligations, it would be fine. June tried to guide her in the right direction, but Junah felt even more embarrassed by the way June looked at her, even though he was only admiring her beauty, something she admitted, recalling that in her time she was a model student in a university magazine. However, all she wanted was for him to shut up and focus on helping her find the path to the Lord. Junah wanted to feel more comfortable since something was bothering her. When June noticed, he was left speechless and more flushed than before. She scolded him, asking why he was blushing and whether it was the first time he'd seen a cosplay like that, since it seemed he hadn't learned anything in school. She also questioned him about the shine emanating from his chalice, as it was too bright. Still embarrassed, Junah wanted them to be on equal footing, and reminded June that there was another promise in their deal. He, not fully understanding, listened as she told him she would guide him to stop being so pure-hearted. With no other options, June went along with it. Although Junah didn't expect much from him due to his shyness, she was left speechless when she saw the golden chalice June was carrying. It confused her, prompting her to ask if there was something odd about it. Junah calmed him, though she became more active, considering how that chalice could help her purify her soul. Jun suggested she clean it first, which angered the girl as it seemed like he was ordering her around. Still, she started cleaning it, impressing Jun, who had never seen how such sacred objects were cleaned. After a while, Hyun went to get holy water, but when he accidentally spilled it, he tried to apologize. Juna scolded him, saying that if he was going to get holy water, he should warn her first since carelessness could cause problems. Then she began drinking the holy water, leaving Jun completely astonished, as he didn't understand why she was doing it. For her, there was nothing wrong with it. Seeing her so beautiful made him move even closer. Jun was speechless, as he seemed determined to teach her the path to God. Nervously, she told him to guide her, and Jun understood what she meant. In the end, they began reading passages from the Bible. Despite Juna's arrogant attitude, Jun demonstrated his knowledge as a priest, helping her seek redemption, so much so that they ended up kissing. Juna, laughing, asked if it was his first kiss, noticing from his expression that it was exactly what she expected from someone like him, and began teasing him a little. Jun mentioned that even though she was being guided, she was still quite arrogant. He moved closer to see her face, which made Juna feel even more nervous, since she didn't like being looked at in that way. She scolded him, telling him not to address her so formally. When Jun asked how she wanted him to call her, she told him to call her Nuna, saying she would feel more comfortable that way, but warned him not to get too excited. Jun noticed that, in reality, she was the shyest one in that situation. They continued their prayers to God until Jun once again spilled the holy water. This time, Juna didn't mind as much, although she was still intrigued by the chalice's glow. Jun explained that it was probably because it was his first time at a mass, and having such a pretty Nuna helping him could be the reason. That response made Juna blush even more. Jun, realizing what he had said out loud, felt just as embarrassed. Both fell silent, but he suggested they continue preaching the word of God since nothing was stopping them, though he added that if she wasn't comfortable, they could stop. Despite her embarrassment, Jun agreed, and they continued the mass for a bit longer. Finally, Juna confessed that her soul had been purified, as the use of the holy water had been effective. Later, both were resting. Hyun-ah, though still arrogant, was clearly embarrassed. Jun commented that he was no longer someone pure of heart, but to Juna he always would be. She asked if he had enjoyed praying with her, and though Jun didn't affirm it outright, he became flustered and blushed. Juna congratulated him for having a pretty teacher to guide him, which embarrassed him even more. Then Juna suggested they shower before leaving. After stepping out of the shower, both remained silent, reflecting on what had happened. Even so, Jun thanked her for everything, and though Juna wasn't sure what to say, she said goodbye to him, reminding him that he should consider what happened a good experience and that he would remember it for the rest of his life. Without waiting for a response, Juna ran off, excusing herself by saying she didn't feel well, knowing they probably wouldn't see each other again. Jun watched her leave and remained alone, thinking that what they had experienced was too much for both of them that day. A few days later, Jun still remembered that first experience of getting closer to the Lord. Although it was a fresh memory, thinking about what had happened with Juna, he felt relieved that it wasn't just a simple dream. At that moment, he received a call from his friend Minsu. When he answered, Minsu suggested they take the bus together the next day, as he needed Jun's help to rank up in League of Legends with some other friends. If Jun accepted, they would treat him to a meal. However, Jun mentioned that he had work, to which Minsu understood and said goodbye without further comment. Hyun had already anticipated that this would happen, as he always felt like someone without value, which made him believe he wouldn't have real friends. While walking, he noticed a group of boys laughing, and among them, a very pretty girl he hadn't seen before. He wondered if they went to the same university, but he supposed life must be much more fun with someone so beautiful by your side. The girl noticed Jun's gaze, though he didn't understand why he couldn't stop looking at her. Suddenly, he heard a voice calling him. When he turned, he realized it was the same girl, asking to speak with him for a moment because she had a question. That same afternoon, sitting on a bench outside the school, Jun was nervous in front of the girl. He couldn't stop wondering what she wanted. He thought it might be something related to religion, or that perhaps she had noticed his gaze and felt uncomfortable. Maybe she would even ask for an apology or compensation for something. The girl asked if he felt uncomfortable since his expression was hard to read. Jun, somewhat confused, told her he was fine. Just as she was about to ask her question, Jun interrupted, asking if it had anything to do with religion. She denied it, explaining that it wasn't that. She told him he probably didn't recognize her because she looked different with makeup compared to the first time they met. Then she took a pair of glasses out of her case, put them on, and adjusted her hair a bit, giving him hints about who she was. That's when Jun realized it was Yeonji, Juna's friend. He apologized for not recognizing her and for what happened the day before, but she brushed it off. In his mind, Jun remembered seeing her as a nerd in the game room, but now he found it incredible how much someone could change with a little makeup. Yeonji mentioned that Juna had told her what happened that day, which made Jun nervous. Although Yeonji said they had a good time with his punishment, her tone didn't reflect any happiness. Jun understood that they wanted him to take responsibility for his actions. He was about to apologize for meeting her friend for a mass, but he was interrupted when Yeonji mentioned they had gone out to eat. Jun didn't quite understand what she was referring to, but Yeonji congratulated him for being so considerate with her friend. Despite Juna's teasing and pranks, she appreciated that Jun had been understanding, especially considering how challenging the bet was, and that he had behaved like a true gentleman. Jun, for his part, felt relieved he hadn't said anything inappropriate, and mentioned that he had really enjoyed the meal Juna had treated him to. However, for Yeonji, the most impressive thing was that despite Jun being in the silver rank, it seemed like he was hiding his true skills. Something didn't add up because although Juna was in the gold rank and very skilled in one-on-one fights, Jun had easily surpassed her. Yeonji observed how Jun moved the mouse and pressed the keyboard with the dexterity of someone she had only seen in high-level streams, but never in person. No matter how much she thought about it, she was sure that skill didn't belong to a simple silver rank. She knew Jun was a smurf, which left him speechless. Now Yeonji assumed he had been a professional player or was on his way to becoming one. But after analyzing it further, she thought he might play on other people's accounts to make quick money and asked if she was right. Jun tried to avoid responding, but eventually admitted her assumptions were correct. However, he clarified that he had nothing to do with that, or at least he hadn't been called to play on her account. Yeonji denied it, though she admitted she needed him for something else. She proposed a more serious bet, which Jun didn't entirely understand at the time. Later that afternoon, they went to the city, and Jun still didn't quite grasp what they were doing. Yeonji took him to a somewhat hidden place. He asked why a school club would be located outside the school and in an alley. Yeonji explained there was a good reason, but first showed him the club's location. He saw the name Gang Chang. Upon entering, they were greeted by all the members, who seemed flustered. Everyone noticed Jun's presence, but the most embarrassed was Juna, who recognized him instantly. Jun also felt uncomfortable with the situation, to the point of wanting to leave. However, Juna threw a notebook at him to kick him out and demanded to know why he was in her club. She scolded Yeonji for bringing him, but Yeonji asked her to calm down and compose herself before anyone else entered. One of the girls explained to Yeonji that the heat was because the air conditioner was broken. Surprised, Yeonji asked what had happened. Another girl mentioned that at first, it wouldn't turn on, and when Juna tried to fix it, she ended up breaking it completely. It turned out they just needed to change the batteries in the remote control. Even so, Juna still wanted to know why Yeonji had brought Jun to the club. Just as Yeonji was about to explain, Jun interrupted, mockingly calling Juna Nuna, which made her lunge at him to shut him up. At that moment, one of Juna's friends suggested she change before continuing to bother Jun. Meanwhile, let's rewind a bit to when Jun asked Yeonji what she needed him for. She explained that her gaming club had been around for half a year, but hadn't achieved notable results. She admitted the club faced many problems, which was why they needed his skills. Jun understood Yeonji's intentions, but knew he often got asked for favors like this, and at that moment, he wasn't interested. He suggested she look for someone else. However, Yeonji stopped him, saying it would be fun, and that if they achieved good results, she'd be willing to do whatever he wanted, promising Jun. But before responding, he wanted to know if Juna was also part of the club. Back to the present, Jun introduced himself again to the girls, though internally he was full of embarrassment. Some of them were excited, while others were not so enthusiastic. Jun hadn't expected to find only women in the club. Yeonji, a first-year university student, introduced herself as the president of the Gamchang Gaming Club. Then there was Kang So-min, who couldn't stop looking at her phone, and Jeon Da, a third-year student who appeared very formal. Jun couldn't help but notice Da's strong personality, but what unsettled him most was Juna, who intimidated him with her annoyed attitude. Jun acted completely differently from the last time they saw each other. As the club's supervisor, Juna was against Jun joining the team, arguing that they didn't need a guy, especially not him, whom she considered the worst. Despite this, Yeonji asked her to calm down, reminding her that the last time they got along well, which didn't go unnoticed by the other girls, who noticed how close they seemed. Juna immediately told Jun to shut up, threatening to kill him if he mentioned anything about that day, and asked if he had enjoyed his meal. So-min reminded Juna they had a competition in the game room next week and were short-staffed. Yeonji confirmed this, recalling Jun's skills, and pointed out it would be hard to find someone else. Da also agreed, thinking it was great to have a guy in the club. Just by looking at him, she sensed he was a good person, and if he also had skills, even better. Jun was more focused on Da's personality until she, noticing that Jun was a second-year student, assumed he was 21 years old, and asked if she could speak informally to him, to which he agreed. At that moment, Juna started teasing Jun, scolding him for staring too much at Da and reminding him that she had a boyfriend. Later, they accepted Jun as a temporary member, but he wanted to know when he'd be officially accepted, something Juna wasn't sure about. Even so, she criticized him, saying his face showed that something had bothered him. If he was upset, he could leave, but that didn't affect Jun, though internally he was very angry. Yeonji then asked Juna to calm down, saying that depending on next week's results, they'd decide if Jun could stay as an official member. Jun felt a bit uncomfortable, especially since his official match was the following week. Even so, Juna wasn't thrilled about him staying. For her part, Yeonji apologized to Jun for her teammates' behavior and commented that Juna was always like this at first, but eventually they'd get along better. Juna saw this as a good challenge to prove she could be even ruder. Then Yeonji told Jun that if he needed anything else, he shouldn't hesitate to ask, which he appreciated. Yeonji also asked them all to give their best effort, which left Somin slightly worried. Suddenly, Somin asked Yeonji to take her home as she had to leave. Yeonji remembered she also needed to leave to prepare for her live stream that afternoon. Da took the opportunity to ask Yeonji to take her to school because she had a date with her boyfriend. Though Juna joked that they were all leaving, she asked Jun to stay because she needed to interview him. Yeonji told them they'd leave first so they could talk calmly. Somin also said goodbye but looked at Jun with disdain before leaving, which confused him. At that moment, Juna spoke, asking Jun why he was in the club and what he wanted. This created an awkward silence. Finally, Jun explained that it was Yeonji who brought him there. However, to Juna, it was very suspicious, and she wasn't going to let him join the team just because he showed up out of nowhere. She didn't believe anything he said and assumed he was there only to look for her. She demanded he be honest and tell her what he was really doing. Seeing Juna's determination, Jun decided to be honest and confessed that he had gone there on purpose because he wanted to see her again. For Juna, this was difficult to process, and upon understanding his words, she blushed. What embarrassed her the most was thinking that Jun had gone to find her to pray together again.